Now that I have my application built out, I can actually start to add data in here. I can use the forms that we're given to start filling things in. I could use any type of existing data and import that. And so just to help us visualize how this application is working, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring in a spreadsheet of assets that I already have. And I'll use that, now that we've got that in here, to create my first set of reports. And so on this screen, you're seeing the list of all assets that I just brought into the system. And what you'll find is that there are already some dynamic filters on the left side of the screen, which I can use to start tailoring the data that I'm seeing to only the items that I really care about. And what you'll find is, as I start adding filters here, so I can add one to make sure that I'm only looking at phones, and I can add one to make sure that I'm only looking at phones from a specific vendor. And I can now save that up at the top in order to give myself a permanent window into phones from that vendor. And so that's one particular set of assets that I know I'm going to need to track moving forward. You could obviously create lots of different reports based on all sorts of different criteria here. But just as an example, you can see that now this app has a report here that's permanent. I can put that on a dashboard, and it's always going to be up to date in real time. Now that I have a nice table report to start tracking, filtered lists of assets, you'll also find that visualizing data really helps people to understand exactly what's going on. And we saw that in the last couple of applications we were looking at. So I want to show you a little bit about how you can start creating some of those visualizations in just a couple minutes each. So in this case, let's create a bar chart using the current value of our assets and comparing that to the original price of those assets, and making sure that we're tracking that by the category under which these assets fall. So is it a phone? Is it a laptop? Is it a server? So now I've got that criteria all filled in here. I name my report, save it, and now I've got my visualization all ready to go. And just like the first report that I created, I can be putting this on a dashboard. I could even be sending it out as a subscription email to various people who really need to stay on top of the cost and the depreciation of assets moving forward. So putting some of these cool visualizations onto our dashboard should be just as easy as creating the visualizations and the forms and the apps themselves. And so here you'll see on my home page, I can always customize this dashboard that I've got right here and start dragging and dropping some of the reports that I want right onto the page. I can even choose how large I want them to be displayed and start adding in other things like search fields, instructions if I want to put some text in here, buttons to create some additional workflow, and even to the point where I can embed other websites or forms onto this dashboard itself. So really kind of creating a one-stop shop, giving our users a nice bespoke experience so that the first time they log in, they have everything that they need in order to get started. As you're going through and creating these dashboards, it's important to remember that you can create multiple dashboards for every app that you have. And so that's going to really help, because when you have multiple users, each one of them may have a different set of requirements. And so as you're going through, start thinking about how one dashboard might need to look different from another. And anytime you need to start creating additional pages, you can go into the application settings, find this pages link, and create that new dashboard from scratch. So all these different pages that you've created here, as you've gone through, created different dashboards, need to be assigned to people somehow. And when we start thinking about people, that also introduces a whole nother concept that we haven't really talked about at all, which is governing the experience of a user and also the permissions for that user. How do we control exactly what someone can see and do, not only to give them a good experience, but also to make sure that they're not doing anything that we need to keep secure. So in order to do that, we have a concept of roles built into QuickBase. And these roles can be assigned anytime I share an application with someone. So when I share an application here, in this case with Rob, I'm going to invite him in, and you can see that I can make him a participant, a viewer, or an administrator. I'm not going to say that I don't trust Rob, but I think that we can go ahead and safely make him a viewer here and not allow him to go ahead and make any changes in the application schema or to the dashboards or reports that we have, just giving him the ability to use the application as an end user. Now, that role is something that can be customized even further. You don't have to use these 3 roles that QuickBase has given you by default. If I want to, I can go in and edit that or add a new one. And from here, you'll see that you can start to go in and adjust what can be done at the table level, what can be done at the field level, as well as some of the actual user interface and what's actually showing up for our various users as they navigate through the application itself. The last thing you'll see here is the actual dashboard page. This is where we can actually take one of those dashboards that we created and assign it to a role, making sure that anytime someone in that role logs in, the first thing that they see is always going to be the dashboard that we put together for them. Having these dashboards assigned is really helpful since now everyone's got exactly what they need to see. But one of the things that we find a lot of times is that organizations have lots of requests for new reports that come in. You know, as someone's using the system, they may think of a new way to start looking at their data that they hadn't considered previously. So in order to prevent some of those requests from hitting the IT backlog again, we have this whole concept that Rob mentioned earlier around citizen development. And so here you'll see within the role, you can leave the ability to create reports enabled for users so that they can begin creating their own reports, their own visualizations, and getting the most out of this application for them. The nice thing about that is that they'll even have the option to create personal reports. And so those personal reports are really designed to be used by the individual specifically, as well as common reports which can be shared with everyone like the ones we've seen so far. So now everybody in the application here has what they need. We've got assets being tracked. We've got the right reports in the right place. I think we can call this application ready to roll out. So now we're ready to move on to the next item on our backlog.